Disney is celebrating 100 years of magic and global domination. So let's celebrate, as I preserve Disney's history by looking at the first 100 Disney games. Half of them you will have probably never heard of. The first ever Disney game is actually a Mickey Mouse game from the Game & Watch in 1981 called, yeah, you'll never guess, Mickey Mouse. Given the popularity of their movies, it's great that the honour does get to go to Mickey. Game & Watch games are generally pretty basic portable device games, but they can be a lot of fun, and yeah, this one is. Mickey's on a farm and he's got to collect all the eggs in his basket before they smash on the ground. What I love about this game is the lore. It's clearly a Sorcerer's Apprentice game, because that basket isn't filling up. He's created a magic portal in there, it's the only explanation. But in all seriousness, what's interesting about this game, besides it being the first, is Nintendo acquired a Disney license, but wasn't allowed to use Mickey Mouse in every country, so they renamed the game to Egg, and replaced Mickey with a wolf. It's not a Disney game though, that's a Nintendo game. Let's establish some ground rules for this video. I will be showcasing all of these games in release order, and anything affiliated with Disney goes, but I won't be including Marvel, Star Wars, Fox, or games from other miscellaneous properties, as when they were released, Disney didn't own them. However, I will be including cancelled games, but we'll get to that a little later. Last time we had Mickey, so let's give him a friend with Mickey and Donald. It's another Game & Watch classic, this time in 1982. So there's a fire and it's up to Mickey and Donald to save the day. Oh, and Goofy. Goofy is the one pumping the water, which I imagine is a very strenuous job, and this Giga Chad is doing it one-handed whilst resting in the car, and doesn't even take the credit because his name's not in the game title. What a legend. In 1982, Tron changed cinema forever for its groundbreaking technology, so of course we had to have a game. Or 8. Starting with Tron in arcades, you get to recapture your favourite moments like the light cycle, or Pac-Man with tanks, or utilising the discs against terrifying spiders, just how I remember it in the movie. Seriously though, this game is great, and it's very impressive for the time. Next up, we have Tron Deadly Discs for Intellivision, Atari 2600, and Mattel Aquarius. If you're not familiar with all of these devices, don't worry, no one will judge you. I hadn't heard of the Mattel Aquarius prior to researching this. It's apparently one of the biggest failures for home and game computers. Hey, congratulations Mattel! At this point I should probably mention I'll be looking at every version of each game. If there's a drastic difference between versions, I'll be sure to point it out. In this case, the game's generally the same, so it's not too relevant. You take out the enemies with the discs, simple stuff, but the Aquarius version has so many more lines on the screen, and I cannot think of any good reason as to why. It just looks horrible. This is my first impression of the thing, and I'm already seeing why it sucked. Tron Solar Sailor for Intellivision is pretty neat. Whilst it may not look like much, this game featured the IntelliVoice. It was sadly discontinued a year after its launch in 1983, so not too many games got to utilise it, but it allowed the game to have voices to speak to the player, a first for the time.
Energy high. We've been hit! We've been hit! Sector 6.
Obviously, nowadays, this is super primitive and who cares, right? But I imagine for people actually experiencing this kind of technology as it happened, this would have been mind-blowing. Tron Maze-a-Tron for the Intellivision came next, and I really like the idea of this game. Traversing a circuit board maze to stop the MCP is an excellent concept. Is it easy? Oh lord no! I found it super confusing, but it is fun. But the story doesn't end there. A version of Maze-a-Tron was also made for the Atari 2600, but it became so different midway through development, the name changed and it became its own thing. So here's The Adventures of Tron. This game looks and feels like a classic Atari game. Simple, but super fun. Collect the floating bits, then ascend to the next level, all whilst avoiding tanks, grid bugs, and more. What else do you need? This might be the most primitive looking game of the entire video. Tron, Journey to the MCP for the Commodore PET, the Personal Electronic Transactor, also known as the CBM, Commodore Business Machines. It couldn't be called the PET in Europe because Philips had a trademark on the PET name. You have to move through the maze, and if this game looks boring, that's because it really is. I had to inflate the amount I can talk about this game with Commodore history because there's nothing to say. You are welcome. There are more Tron games, but that'll be in a little bit. The final 1982 game is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for the Atari 2600. Or at least it would have been if it were finished. Yes, it's finally a cancelled game. Jeez, what did Snow White say on Twitter? That joke would have been so much better if it was still called Twitter. I refuse to name it the other thing. What I love about cancelled games like this is how silly elements look. The dwarves look like their heads are wavy strawberries. They've got to get to the house quick before Evil Queen gives Snow White a poison apple. Wait, oh no, it looks like she's been cut in half. Oh, we're too late, no. Yeah, the game's fairly boring, but again, I can't blame it. It wasn't finished. And as we move on to 1983, the first game is another cancelled one. Dumbo's Flying Circus for the Atari 2600. This is actually really cool. It's a shame it wasn't finished. You fly around collecting the balloons, and then you gun down some clowns. No, really, that's the game. We have yet another cancelled game next. The final one for this video, in fact. Developed for the Atari 2600, we have Donald Duck's Speedboat. Music to my ears. I don't want to insult the game because, well, it wasn't finished, but it is insultingly short for what it is. You can beat it in about a minute, and Donald must brave the perils of some rocks, a pair of lungs, his nephews— No, Donald, don't! When you beat the game, you see Huey, Dewey, and Louie naked, walking on water, dragging— I have no idea what that is. A massive bong? Or Donald upside down in a cannon? I don't know. Fun piece of trivia with this game, some Wikipedias list this as being cancelled in 1979, so I actually thought that this was the first game for a bit, but that is very wrong because it has 1983 on the title screen. The Sorcerer's Apprentice for the Atari 2600 is the most I've ever been blue-balled by music. It starts the famous music from the cartoon and just stops dead in its tracks by a collectible, and it is constantly infuriating. The game's not even fun. Why would you insult such a wonderful cartoon like this? Mickey in the Great Outdoors for Atari 8-bit computers features Mickey in two adventures. Mickey goes hiking and Mickey goes exploring. They're very basic English and maths minigames, and they're not that fun. But I do enjoy the minigame where you have to solve the sum by bludgeoning a frog to death. That's fun for kids, right? Tron's back with arguably the most famous of the Tron games, Discs of Tron. This arcade classic is popular, and for good reason. My word, it's so fun! It's crazy, this isn't even in the same league as the other Tron games. They really went and took one of the best moments from the film and made it into a fun game that made you feel like you're really there regardless of the limitations of the time. Genuinely, this is one of the most fun games showcased in this video, and if you can find a way to play it, absolutely do. You don't need an actual arcade machine. There are other ways. It's time for another home computer to introduce itself. Tutor is a home computer that was originally sold in Japan in 1982 as the Tutor, and then a year later came to the UK as the Grandstand Tutor. It only had one game of note, so let me introduce you to Mickey Athletic Land. From the title screen alone, I'm scared. What has happened to Minnie? She looks like her head's attached to a door wedge. This is actually quite a charming little game. It's a fun enough 2D platformer where your failure doesn't have much consequence in the early levels, and that's a good thing, because you'll fail a lot. You'll very quickly get sick of the sound effects and be amused by Mickey's ducking animation, which is constant panic over whether he's tied his shoes. But yeah, this is a fun time, until you die by being stabbed by a hook. Christ, that noise is brutal! Our final Tron game is called Tron. This is for Tommy as well, but not the Tommy Tutor. No, this is the Tomytronic, a portable device exclusively for this game. You must defeat the MCP that looks like Mother Brain from Metroid combined with a lava lamp. I'm actually breaking my own rules for this video. This was actually released in 1981, before Tron even came out. I could have put it earlier on in the video alongside the first Mickey Game & Watch game, but I wanted to put it here because it coincides with the other Tommy game. How crazy is this? But this is from 1981. Honestly, it looks really impressive. You are witnessing something very rare here. Mickey's Alpine adventure for the Tandy TRS-80 color computer. There is only one video of this game, and it has less than 40 views after being up for more than 6 years. Thanks, Jet Set Willie Jr. Amazing name. It's not exactly colour, more green, at least their gameplay is, but what this is a desktop microcomputer by Tandy, sold through their Radio Shack stores, and this thing has a bunch of games. Most of them, barely anyone has seen. The machine ran on cassette tapes, and the version with the monitor was $599 at the time. That's nearly $3,000 today, good lord! This game, in terms of gameplay, is very primitive, as it's the most basic of learning questions, but it does have full voice acting, and it sounds like Satan is trying to liquefy my brain.
Placed a check mark beside it on the page, but 3 things have not been checked off.
I particularly like Donald's help clip. As this video is the only one to exist and it doesn't go through the whole game, I don't actually know if Mickey is in it, but he's not at the start, so I'm going to assume he died off screen in that Alpine adventure. Oh, by the way, there are quite a few Tandy games. Next is Telling Time with Donald Duck. Whoa, Gladstone's in this game. That's unexpected. This is another rare game where there's only one video, and again, it sounds like my ears are being assaulted. The noise you're hearing is the cassette. It was definitely worth all that money! I appreciate the game is trying to teach kids how to tell the time, but I think it would be more effective and cheaper to do it with a loving lesson from a parent, or maybe in a classroom or something. In 1983, Walt Disney also released, for the Tandy, I know, who would have guessed, a game called Space Probe Math. As far as I can tell, it features no characters from the Disney brand, so it's just an educational game with Walt Disney's name attached to it. Very weird indeed, and I don't think there's another instance of Disney just putting their name to something without characters connected to it. Though, if you saw a screenshot in isolation, you'd be forgiven for thinking it's an early Star Trek game. The characters certainly have that vibe. Okay, this is really stupid. The next one is Goofy Covers Government. No, I'm not joking. There's no one I'd like to learn about the government with more than Goofy. This will be utter chaos. Or it should be. It's pretty tame because it has to teach you. No Goofy fumbling and 100 armed officers surrounding him because he tripped into the Oval Office and pulled the president's trousers down or something. So disappointing.
Is there anything the president can't do?
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's not Goofy's voice. It just doesn't sound right. Happy New Year! It's 1984. So what's next? Scrooge Breaks into Fort Knox is an educational game. No, wait, no, I'm sorry, I made that up. Strangely enough, this game is much more interesting than that. Problem solving with Scrooge Mcduck for the Tandy. There are no videos of this game online. The only thing that exists is a small excerpt from a TRS-80 microcomputer magazine from October of 1983. This game has been totally lost to time. Absolutely wild that that's the case. I wouldn't rule out the game getting cancelled with no record of that happening, but that is purely speculation. Oh, but aha, there is another game lost to time. We've seen Space Probe Math, there was also Space Probe Reading. Again, the only thing that I can find online is the same magazine. All other mention of the game just doesn't exist. Following that are Math Adventures with Mickey and Mickey's World of Writing. I don't really have anything to say about these. They are exactly what you'd expect at this point. We return to the Game & Watch with Mickey Mouse Panarama screen version. It's always nice when you see references to cartoons and games. This could easily resemble Mickey's Circus. The original game resembles The Musical Farmer, and Mickey and Donald resembles Mickey's Fire Brigade. Or, in this case, it's just Donkey Kong Circus, redone to look like Mickey and Donald. Fun fact, even though Donkey Kong came first, its model number was MK96, whilst Mickey's one was DC95. I assume the MK is short for Mickey, and the DC is short for Donkey Kong. But they just spelt it wrong. I could be wrong though. Mickey's Space Adventure for the DOS, Apple Mac, Apple II, Commodore 64, and our old friends the Tandy TRS-80, the final Tandy Disney game in fact. Yeah, this was on a lot of stuff. There's not really any difference between versions outside of quality. This game lets you choose your direction within still images, and based on what you pick, it'll lead to the next image. My favourite thing is how strange Mickey looks. At times he really looks like a bootleg version you'd see on something like Family Guy, where you can see the resemblance, but it's clearly different to avoid copyright. Oh wow, the next game is fascinating. This is our first Tiger LCD handheld device, and it's probably one you've never heard of. Tiger Electronics are kind of like the Game & Watch, just a different company making them, and they were usually very meh. This is Picsou. Don't know what that is? Oh, I don't blame ya. That is the name for Uncle Scrooge in France. This is a game exclusively released in France, and there is no gameplay of it online. I found one going on eBay, but it's $125, and there's no way I'm buying it for this video that will net me like $5 for the hundreds of hours I'm putting into it. Incidentally, if you're enjoying this, leaving a like, subscribing, and checking out my other content really means a lot. Thank you. We'll get back to Tiger Electronics later, but for now we have Donald Duck's Playground for the Commodore 64. And despite the name, not once does Donald Duck go to a playground. Unless we're implying this town is his playground and he owns everyone like they're puppets on a string. Mickey does run a hardware store like a suburban dad just trying to settle down. Maybe he goes golfing on the weekends. I don't like Goofy in this game. Something about him terrifies me. If I saw him in a dark alley, I'd run. The idea is you're trying to make Donald's overwhelmingly large house fun for his nephews by working at different jobs and buying playground equipment. Oh, bless him, he's a really good dude. It's the final game of 1984. Winnie the Pooh in the 100 Acre Wood for the Amiga, Apple II, Atari ST, Commodore 64, and DOS. There aren't any differences between versions outside of general graphical stuff, but oh boy, we're gonna look at the Amiga version. Oh, Eeyore, why so blue? Rabbit, why so... what the hell is wrong with you? Roo, you look massive in this shot. Pooh, why is your face cut in half? I know there are limitations for the time, but I truly love stuff like this. Seeing cursed art of our favourite characters really brings a tear to my pixelated dead eyes. Goodbye, 1984. Hello, 1986? Yeah, we're skipping a year. Despite how popular Disney is and how much the world is evolving, there were technically no new games. The Winnie the Pooh game did release on some of the other systems in 85 instead of 84, but it is the same game. So, we're back to Donald Duck's Playground, this time for Amiga, Atari ST, Apple II, and IBM PC Junior. Those were definitely some things I said. The IBM PC Junior released in 1984 and was discontinued in 1985, but despite that, still had one Disney game released for it the next year in 1986. Anyway, this is the Amiga version, and as you can see, it's a huge step up from before. It's visually great, and Donald builds a literal rocket ship slide for his nephews whilst doing some minimum wage jobs. Incidentally, one of those jobs is managing all the trains for the neighbouring areas. I wouldn't trust Donald with that, no matter how many qualifications he has. If something bothers him, he'll go into a rage and ignore what's going on with the trains. The Black Cauldron for the Amiga, Apple II, Atari ST, DOS and Tandy 1000 is finally another game based on a film of the same name, which was based on the Chronicles of Prydain novel of the same name. It's been a while since we've had a movie tie-in. This is an adventure game by Sierra, who you might know for making the King's Quest games. This was made shortly after the first King's Quest game in the series, so you'll recognise similarities, but it remains one of the few Sierra games to be based on a film, which is a neat little fact. I've never really been one for adventure games, but it's an excellent game and very impressive for the time. If this is your thing, it's another game I genuinely recommend. And would you believe it? We're out of 1986 already. Before we get to the next one, I want to talk about Mickey and Minnie Jangaroo Tanken, a little handheld LCD game by Epoch. There are conflicting reports on this. A bunch of places say this released in 1993, but others say 1987 as well as 1993. Unfortunately, there isn't any gameplay of it, so I don't have a clue how it plays, and it makes it much harder to verify because I can't find two different versions. So I believe the 1987 version is false. I could be mistaken, and if I am, I apologise, but I think there was only one of them. But this next game is very real, and again, it's for an Epoch handheld LCD. Tough Mickey Boxing Champ is a Japanese game that has Mickey pummel Pete, which has been Mickey's destiny since they met 59 years prior. The gameplay I'm showing you is by a channel on YouTube called Satoru K. It has 7 views in the last 4 years and is the only gameplay online. Thank you so much, Satoru. Hooray! It's our first NES game! Mickey's Mousecapade had its followers, but it surely rose to popularity because of the Game Grumps' long parody of GameDude8899's review of the game. And whilst I'd love to say that this game is a steaming pile of poopy ass sticks smothered in pus from a fisherman's piles, yeah, no, this game is fine. Not the pinnacle of the NES, but certainly not the worst. I've played some absolute garbage, and this ain't it. The final boss is a Russian doll version of Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, and I'm intrigued and confused by this. Why is she here? Why is she squished? Again, why is she here? This isn't Kingdom Hearts. Upon defeating her, Mickey and Minnie rescue Alice from Alice in Wonderland? Huh. When you walk away, you won't hear me say poopyastic. Basil the Great Mouse Detective for the Amstrad CPC, Atari 8-bit, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum is a game based on the movie of the same name, and it is anything but elementary. All versions of the game are more or less the same, just graphically different, but it's a fairly decent 2D action-adventure game. I really like that it has your items on screen at all times, and I appreciate the clock in the corner. You have to solve the case in that time, and it's pretty interesting. Maybe not the most engaging game in the world, but you get to sneak through mail slots, indoors, and this pleases me way more than it probably should. Happy 1988! It's time for Mickey Mouse, the computer game. Solid name, well done. This is for Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum, and whilst the gameplay is pretty much the same, the visuals wildly vary. First off, the title screen is a masterpiece. Mickey looks like he enjoys gunning down poor defenseless ghosts, but the variation on the ghosts in the stage is exquisite. This spooky dude in shades in the Atari version, I love him. Oh my gosh, and he turns to a cross when he dies. It's the little things that make a difference. Oh, and the music is the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and it's pretty cool to hear the different versions that each system is able to produce. We've reached this era! Mickey and Minnie's Fun Time print kit for the DOS. One of those games where you could Photoshop before Photoshop. You had 40 images to play with and could print them out. There sadly isn't any footage online, but I appreciate these types of things. There are a bunch of them in the Looney Tunes and Barbie video too, so it's super cool to see the earliest versions of this kind of technology. Surprising that Disney is the one that isn't backed up anywhere though. Oh god! Donald Duck is being chased by a dildo with legs! Oh sweet lord, the Amstrad version! That is going to insert itself up Donald's arse and never leave. So this is Donald's alphabet chase for Amiga, Amstrad, Apple, Commodore 64, DOS, and the ZX Spectrum. As is tradition, they are all basically the same, but equally cursed! Michael Mouse's peeled flesh is just on Donald's bathroom floor. I hate this game. I love it, but Jesus Christ, I hate it. The T on the scooter is kind of cute though. What happens when Donald collects all the letters? He earns his rest and gets attacked by all of them in the night. From this point on, I'm only going to show a picture of the console or computer if it hasn't been shown before, just so you're aware. Donald the Hero for Commodore 64 is fine. You avoid squished eggs whilst collecting orange pellets on a very open field with a well and Donald Duck's mansion. Hey, I don't make the law, Donald's a millionaire now. The game is fun enough, but it gets boring very quickly. But what doesn't get boring is a new masterpiece which changed cinema. Sure, cartoons had been blended with real life before, but never like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Naturally, a game had to be released alongside the film, and release it did for the Amiga, Commodore 64, and DOS. The game is fine. Not great, just fine. Whatever. What I want to talk about is the soundtrack. Oh man, the soundtrack on the Amiga is awesome. Yes, that is what I'm talking about. We haven't been able to appreciate a game with a decent soundtrack up till now. Matterhorn Screamer sounds like either a serial killer or a porn film. But actually, it turns out it's a game. Oh, look at this! I'm gonna tell my grandkids this is Celeste. Releasing on the Apple II, Commodore 64, and DOS, you play as Goofy climbing a mountain, not screaming. I assume the mountain is called the Matterhorn, because if not, both words in the title were misleading. Donald Duck for the Famicom is a fascinating game. It's a bunch of fun sports events, which I enjoyed, but the game was actually only released in Japan. When it came overseas, it was changed to be Snoopy's Silly Sports Spectacular, which is a really hard name to say. The reason for this was Capcom held the exclusive rights to make Disney games on Nintendo systems in the US. I absolutely love stuff like this. It's such a weird piece of history. The Jungle Book for Amiga, Amstrad, and Atari is a weird game. You play as if you're watching the movie in a cinema, and apparently it's a pretty crap film because everyone falls asleep midway through. Also, the game is not like the film in any way, shape or form. To be clear, this isn't a case where this was a movie tie-in game and the devs didn't know anything about the plot. This film had been out for 20 years, how do you get this so wrong? Okay, I'm kind of blown away by this one. The Viewmaster Interactive Vision System was a VHS game system, kind of like those interactive DVDs, but in 1988. This is so ahead of its time. Hey, let me ask my buddy Longevity if he thinks this will be around for a while. What's that, Jevity? Just 1 year? Oh, that's a shame. This is Disney Cartoon Arcade. Ludwig von Drake guides you through as you watch parts of famous Disney cartoons, and then the cartoon pauses and you play a minigame based around the cartoon. Sure, the minigames aren't the most exciting thing ever, but I am truly astonished that this exists and is as competent as it is. I had no idea this kind of technology was around this early, and it's kind of surprising it didn't catch on. The system cost $120 at the time and only had 7 games. This one, 2 Muppets games, and 4 Sesame Street games. Honestly, if Disney went all in and did this for a bunch of their films, this might have been a hit. But that's a story for a parallel universe. This is The Chase on Tom Sawyer's Island for Apple II, Commodore 64, and DOS. A very primitive Pac-Man-like game based on the Tom Sawyer Island attractions at Disney's theme parks. There's not really much to say beyond that, but hey, look at this! Games started doing the Disney intro. That's neat. It wasn't a huge amount that did it, but it's cool to see. Let's head back to the LCD games with Mickey Mouse Orange Express. Mickey has the joys of catching oranges. At least, I assume they're oranges. The game's not called Mickey Mouse Still Beating Hard Express after all. Mickey Mouse Jungle Daiboken is another Japan-exclusive Tomy game. There's no gameplay or much info anywhere of this game, so I don't really know what you do. I'm going to assume Mickey Mouse stumbles into the jungle and decides to do an epic dance-off against some monkeys, a lion, a meerkat, and a sentient coconut. But that's just speculation, of course. The final 1988 game is Mickey Mouse Maho no Yakata, also known as Mickey Mouse Magical Castle, a Japanese exclusive Epoch LCD handheld game. You brave the magical castle as you fight ghosts, skeletons, a witch, a broom, and repressed memories that come back at the worst possible time. Hello 1989, goodbye life. All logic has gone out the window. We are willingly choosing to be in a train driven by Goofy. Goofy's Railway Express for Amiga, Atari, Commodore 64, Commodore 128, and DOS has Goofy drive his friends around Duckburg. Well, sort of. Donald gets left behind because Goofy hates him now, or he's having an affair with Daisy because she was let on board. It's a very straightforward game, but I do appreciate the art style and animation. Look at this happy sun, it's adorable! I don't get what the deal is with making Mickey look just the worst. Like, it has been a common thing since Game 1 that Mickey just doesn't look like Mickey. And it's still happening! We're at the turn of the decade, technology has evolved, why is he still disgusting? Aha, this is a fun one. Roger Rabbit for the Famicom is a Japanese exclusive title, but you might recognise it as something else. This was released in the US as Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle. When they were bringing it overseas, they thought that maybe Roger Rabbit was a bit outdated or wasn't popular enough, so they updated it to Bugs Bunny. And as it turns out, they made it into a series with 4 sequels, even though one of them is a Woody Woodpecker game and it looks god-awful. We're at number 50, which means we're only halfway there. I say only. I'm having fun making this. Why should I worry? Why should I care? Okay, just a little reference, because the next game is Oliver & Company for the Amiga, Atari, and DOS. Your time as Oliver will be spent in a couple of the movie's memorable locations, collecting sausages, getting hit by bones, and using the power of friendship and teamwork. Like a lot of games of the era, it's pretty short, but it's fine enough. The Game Boy released in Japan in 1989, and a Mickey Mouse game was one of the first to release on it. Look familiar? Hi, Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle. Again. Yep, this game had 3 separate versions, but whilst the Bugs Bunny version continued to thrive over the years, so too did the Mickey version. Sort of, but we'll get to that later. There was a second Oliver & Company game, a cute little Epoch handheld, but there isn't any gameplay online. Thanks to a $55 eBay listing, it seems you collect sausages and deliver them to your friends, whilst avoiding dishes from the hot dog vendor. I can't say I know exactly how it plays, but it sounds fun enough. Can you help me? Yes, this building is empty. Okay. What did I ask? Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the NES is certainly a game that tries. Can you help me? Yes, this building is empty. No, wait, no, that's not what I wanted to say. And no, it isn't. There are things and you are in it. The definition of not empty. It tries to cover the film and it succeeds in some places and fails in others, but it's got a lot to explore with many familiar set pieces. Can you help me? Yes. No, stop! Are you all going to say the same thing? This might be the most famous game to show up in this video. DuckTales, one of the most iconic NES games released as early as 1989. Popular for its excellent level design, stunning music, epic secrets, and Scrooge McDuck just being a badass collecting treasure. There is no shortage of fun. I know that the moon theme is people's favourites, and it's pretty easy to see why. Say that I think the Transylvania theme is my favourite. I really like the eerie vibe it captures, but we're splitting hairs at this point. The whole soundtrack is awesome. It doesn't matter who you are, as long as you like to dine on a fine platformer, you're gonna love this game. But this wasn't the only version. DuckTales also released for the Game Boy, and I'm gonna class this as a separate game, because whilst it does have the same gameplay, levels, and music, the level design layout is different to cater to the smaller screen. There are definitely similarities to the NES version, and oh god, the music is grazing on the Game Boy, but I still think it deserves its own spot. But wait! There's still one more, a Tiger Electronic LCD handheld DuckTales game. The best footage I can find is by Handheld Game Fan. It's no hard to see what's going on, but I appreciate them creating content for us. Scrooge gets to collect treasure and bop his favourite villains on the head. I mean, that's all I want out of my Scrooge games. Oh, one more thing. We've hit a milestone. This specific game released in 1990. We're in a new decade, people! Chip and Dale, cursed monstrosities. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, The Adventure in Nimnol's Castle, released in 1990 for the DOS. And whilst I appreciate this game because we need more Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers in our lives, the sprite work scares me and it's kind of boring. I'm sorry. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers for the NES, however, is awesome. Such an excellent platformer that you can even play 2-player in. But what impressed me most is how this game nails the sense of scale. Chip and Dale are tiny. This game gets that. The first level is basically the entire DOS game, and then it has 9 more levels. This game is killing the DOS version. As if this game needed to flex more than it already was. Oh, a fun soundtrack too? Why not just hand the DOS version the gun yourself? Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, the Tiger Electronics version, also exists. It looks fun enough, but it very much looks like many other handheld titles like this, where it's pretty basic and you probably won't be playing it for too long. Thanks Chip and Dale, it was great to see you again. Adventures in the Magic Kingdom for the NES is a treat. Definitely give this a go if you haven't. Mickey, Donald and Goofy want to get into the castle of the Magic Kingdom, but first they'll need 6 keys. To get them, you'll need to explore and do 6 levels. Each are pretty varied and feel fun to play. You know, it's fitting for the spooky level that Mickey is the most terrifying thing here. But look at this! You walk past the mirrors and there's your reflection. I know it's not actually, but it is impressive technology for the time. And one of them is a ghoul. It's so cool! I was really pleasantly surprised with this one. Ooh, it's time for another Japanese Epoch game, but this one is a mystery to me. Its name is Mickey Mouse Washibushi, and there is literally nothing about it anywhere online besides its name. However, we do know about another game called Mickey Mouse Mayoi no Yakata, but this won't count as an entry in this video, as it's actually a board game. Board games are amazing, but we're talking specifically about video games for this video. I can't tell you what you do in this game, but it features Mickey as the Sorcerer, Minnie as the Explorer, Donald Duck as the Hunter, and Goofy Goof as Brave. Just Brave. Alright, I suppose he is. Mickey's 1-2-3, the big surprise party for Amiga and DOS, is such a fun basic numbers game for young children. I adore how silly this game is at points. The idea is you want to throw a party for Donald and need to get stuff for it, but driving to the locations is great because it asks how many wheels you want, and it's so sudden when you put your answer in. It feels like a meme gif or something. Mickey can also choose as a gift a small version of himself. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think that's a very expensive psychiatrist's problem. Now we've learned our 1-2-3s, let's pick up on our ABCs. Mickey's ABCs, A Day at the Fair, also for the Amiga and DOS, shows the impracticality of Mickey's house. He has a pole instead of stairs. Dude should be hench. This one isn't nearly as fun as the first, but I appreciate the effort on display. I've said this many times in this video already, but this is fascinating. Disney Animation Studio for Amiga and DOS essentially gave you basic tools, but a way to make your own animations, and that's really cool. The tools may be basic, but you're able to do a lot with them. Someone on YouTube called Chris Herbert uploaded a video 12 years ago that only has 100 views of cartoons he made using it in 1991, and they're super impressive. I've covered a couple of these types of games in the All the Looney Tunes games video and All the Barbies games video, but I've always wondered if these had some kind of impact or if anyone really took the time to make something cool, and this shows that people did, and it's wonderful to see. Goofy Ski is a Tiger LCD handheld game where Goofy must traverse a dangerous mountain filled with people who don't respect skiing etiquette. Donald and Goofy is the next Japanese exclusive Epoch game. Goofy and Donald are having a rough time at the factory as the escalator, moving all the presents, keeps disobeying and throws them off. I probably gave this one a lot more lore than it deserves, but it looks like one of the better Epoch games. 101 Dalmatians is the next movie to be given the Tiger treatment. You see, this is exactly why I'm surprised we didn't get more games based on classic movies earlier than this. By this point, Disney had a huge repertoire of movies that people loved. These movies were releasing slowly for the VHS as early as 1984, so I expected a lot more games to release to coincide with that, like with Tron and Roger Rabbit. I believe this is the case for this handheld device, as Disney were gearing up to celebrate the movie's 30th anniversary. 101 Dalmatians is over 60 years old now. God, I feel ancient. Listen here, she. I've got 5 Dick Tracy games to talk about, and I don't know a single thing about the movie they're based on. I could go and watch it, but I think it'd be funnier if I didn't. Some of what I say may be factually incorrect. We're starting off with Dick Tracy for the NES. We have our 6 suspects here. They all look cursed. Shady Steve, Conehead Larry, Billy the Gruff, Danger Galore, Greasy Greg, and Tim. We must drive to each location hunting for clues in the most gangster-filled districts of Boxtown, which is every district, by the way. Besides the perilous gangsters, there's also the terror, that is, the infinite pit. They've been reported in hundreds of games, but their crimes remain to spread their ruthless evil in more games. There is also an ending at some point. Approximately more than one person has beaten it before. I haven't. Dick Tracy for the Game Boy is more accurate to the source material, as the film is set in 1938, and I don't believe colour existed back then. Well done to the Game Boy for capturing that accurately. You don't do the driving, as this game focused purely on the 2D combat and platforming. The game ends as your love interest says that you two should go and get some chili. In Dick Tracy for the Amiga, Amstrad GX 4000, Atari ST, Commodore 64, DOS, and ZX Spectrum, Chin Man gets smothered in cum, and Dick Tracy is to blame. Gangsters will shoot Dick Tracy on the top of his head, and he'll fly back. So many levels of realism, I can't get my head around it! I enjoy how in the Commodore version, the gangsters look a little like walking lighthouses who disintegrate on contact. Some of these games are a little different, but I'm still treating it as one game, as the differences are mainly graphical. And finally, Dick Tracy for the Sega Genesis and Master System. Whilst graphically very different, they are generally the same game. Mr. Richard Island has upset the mob again. Why won't they just let things go? Now, Ricky must do what he does best. Gun down 100 mobsters in an epic car chase, and then give a talk about crime to a local school, explaining how if these goons had just had a normal job at a local grocery store, they wouldn't have been unalived. And that's Dick Tracy. 100% accurate, not a word of a lie. It's won 3 Academy Awards. You know your game's a classic when it gets a remake before remakes were mainstream. Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse for the Sega Genesis and Sega Saturn is awesome. It's a solid platformer that's a joy from start to finish, full of excellent levels, design, and truly nightmarish bosses. But I can't help but wonder, why can't they get Mickey right? Something about his face is so creepy. How is this still a problem? Well, it's not a problem in the Sega Master System and Game Gear version. Mickey looks cute and jolly, not mildly menacing. Oh my gosh! Look at that tree, it's so happy! This version of the game has the same level themes, but the design and gameplay is totally different. This one feels a little like DuckTales and Mario Bros. 2 at times, which I can understand. If you want to make a successful new platformer, borrow from the best. Both are great for different reasons, so give them both a go. You'll have a great time either way. The best thing about DuckTales The Quest for Gold is Scrooge gets to dive into his money bin. This makes me very happy. It is immediately followed by Scrooge at his desk, deciding which stocks to buy. Huh. Not what I was expecting, but I don't hate it. This was released for DOS, Windows PC, Amiga, Apple II, Commodore 64, and Mac, and I've got to admit I'm impressed by the amount of choices you have for stages, as you explore for gold. There unfortunately is a lot of repetition in the gameplay, but similarly to the new DuckTales TV series, Webby is the best character as she takes pictures of the silliest animals and I love it. Mickey and Donald Tanoshi Tennisu Kuribu is another Epoch game, this time focusing on tennis. I couldn't tell you how it plays, because you'll never believe it, there's no footage of it anywhere. What a way! And that's the end of 1990. Let's look at 1991. We're starting strong with a certified banger for the Amiga and DOS. It's Mickey's Jigsaw Puzzles. Now, you might think I'm joking, but the Amiga version has some of the most cursed imagery you'll ever see from a Disney game, and I love every second of it. Donald stuck that finger way up there if Mickey's face is anything to go by. Donald does look guilty in a proud sort of way. Also, there's just this freak in the corner, and there's this ghoul too. Joking aside, what is this art? Why is Donald playing the saxophone terrifying? Something about it is so wrong, I love it! Mickey's crossword puzzle maker for the Apple II and DOS sure is what it sounds like. I do appreciate that it does give you the ability to make your own on top of just providing you with a bunch. It'll be nice for the family to try and solve, or maybe yourself in a year or so, or your grandparent every day as the dementia kicks in. This happened to 3 of my grandparents, I can make this joke. Mickey's colours and shapes for the DOS is lame, but credit to Mickey, he must be a good magician, because he magicked the theatre away. I told you we'd be getting more of these. This is Mickey Mouse 2 for the Game Boy, also known as Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle 2 in the US. I mentioned this in the Looney Tunes video, but this is such a step up from the first game. The puzzles are really fun, and I really appreciate how much depth it has as it goes along. Now, whilst these aren't part of this list as they released later, I would be remiss not to mention the other Mickey games that became something else outside of Japan. Mickey Mouse 3 became Kid Clown in Nightmare World, which is a terrible name and box art. Mickey Mouse 4 became The Real Ghostbusters. And Mickey Mouse 5... oh, it was released as a Mickey Mouse game. I can't fathom why they'd change Mickey for a clown, but whatever. In Mickey's Runaway Zoo for Amiga, Atari, Commodore 64 and DOS, you have to count how many animals escaped and subsequently return. I both like and don't like this game. The music is surprisingly intense, whilst these adorable yet cursed scenes occur. I can't tell if I like the art style or hate it. What I do hate is that this game is less than 10 minutes long. Arachnophobia is the worst. Releasing for Amiga, Amstrad, Commodore 64 and DOS. If you're not a fan of spiders, this game is terrible. Sure, you get to remove them from this world, but you also have to look at a lot of them, and I hate this very much. No more, please. Mickey's Dangerous Chase for the Game Boy. Mickey's Dangerous Chase is a 2D platformer, a little like Castle of Illusion for the Game Gear, and you know what? I think I was right. Mickey just kills his neighbour's dog for no reason, sends them to the moon just for walking. As for the game, yeah, solid platformer, can recommend. I've got a bunch of LCD handhelds for you, starting with Mickey and Friends for Tiger Electronics. It's hard to tell what's going on in the video, but Mickey and Donald are raking leaves and Minnie plans to reward them with a cake, but Pete is ruining all their progress, so more raking ensues. I know this sounds like a bit, but genuinely this is the game. Oh wow! The next Tiger game is The Rescuers Down Under, the only Rescuers game. It's a shame that's the case. Bernard punches the villainous Percival McLeach and misses, and yet he still recoils being hit in the other direction. Dude, his head comes clean off briefly, good shot. But credit where it's due, this does have multiple different stages, so it does have a fair amount of replayability. And it's just nice for the Rescuers to get the recognition it deserves. Well done, Tiger Electronics, you managed to make the human version of the Beast more weird looking than he already is in the film. In this Beauty and the Beast adaptation, within 10 minutes, Belle meets the Beast, Gaston meets the Beast, and then Belle falls in love with the Beast and turns him back before the last petal falls. The Beast didn't have a lot of time left, but when he's on a tight deadline, he really delivers. What I find funny is that the Beast doesn't really have a name. He's given the name Prince Adam many years after the film, but we still don't know his surname. Belle might be horrified when she marries him and has to change her surname. Like, what if his surname is just End? It's time for the final 3 Epoch games for this video. Mickey Mouse Fantasy World has no gameplay online, but it appears Mickey, sword in hand, must vanquish a giant. There is a cartoon called Mickey and the Beanstalk, so it's probably a reference to that. Probably. Mickey to Kiampu e Aiku, or Mickey Let's Go to Camp, also has no footage online. This is interestingly different in its design, as it kind of looks like a flip phone. I'm not sure what the game's about though, probably about running from a bear in a campsite that was recently abandoned due to all the bear sightings. There was a massive billboard warning about it, but Mickey just missed it. Oh Mickey, you scamp. Finally, we have Mickey Mouse Hamburger Shop, and hot diggity dog! There is gameplay. This is kind of like Overcooked and other games like it. Is this the first of its kind? Maybe? I have no idea. There are other Epoch games, but they are in the future beyond the first 100. However, there was another Epoch product in 1991, Mickey Mouse's Drive Game. I have no idea what this board game consists of, but it's cool that it exists. I'll be honest, I had never heard of The Rocketeer prior to making this, but it's a superhero film made in 1991 based on the comic of the same name, usually a sign for either triumph or disaster. But we're here to talk about the NES game. Well, first off, the first level's music is a bop. Actually, the whole game's soundtrack is pretty solid, as is the gameplay. The game's design works really well and caters to you being kind of overpowered, given you can fly anywhere given fuel constraints. I'm actually really surprised by this and recommend giving it a go. However, maybe not so much the Tiger Electronics version. It's just a pretty bland game, unfortunately. Look at this game. Isn't it neat? The first cutscene tells you that Ariel gains feet. Okay, song over. The Little Mermaid for NES and Game Boy does indeed open with you going to land, but it doesn't follow the plot of the movie. Ariel has her voice, and Ursula doesn't go near land. The plot kind of says she grants Ariel's wish as a sort of getting her out the way thing. Ariel must travel through the levels and defeat Ursula. I really like this game. Ariel can create bubbles to trap and defeat enemies, she can find thingamabobs around, and because it's all underwater, there's a nice freedom of movement. This is definitely up there as one of my favourite games in this video. Oh, these poor unfortunate souls have the final Tiger game of the video. Not the last ever Tiger game, they exist beyond the millennium. Ariel must collect human items, like forks, dildos, and a Breville sandwich toaster, before Ursula intervenes and uses them for her own selfish goals. Or something like that. As Tiger games go, this one is alright. Now we can end on a high. Not sure if we'll completely miss you though. Fantasia for the Sega Genesis is so cool. You are Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey, and you play through various areas inspired by different sections in Fantasia. It's such a cool and fun concept, and it's a visual and creative delight. Now, it's not all rainbows and dancing hippos, this game is brutally hard at points, and it is a bit of a turn-off, but I loved it! Having a platformer based on multiple concepts from Fantasia is brilliant, and I'd love to see it done again. It probably never will be though. Roger Rabbit returns on the Game Boy, and it is unintentionally very funny. Roger gets a call from Marvin Acme telling him to meet him in his office. He asks for directions, phasing through a dude, and then when he talks to Acme, Acme gets shot! Roger Rabbit is entirely unfazed by this, and just walks off without haste. Thing is, the game does play out some events from the film, just in a different way. Like how Roger Rabbit has a standoff, where Roger has a gun, and Doom has an actual tank. You know, those kind of differences. It's not bad, it's just drawn that way. And Roger returns one last time on the Amiga and DOS with hair-raising havoc, and it's fine. This is an interesting take, as instead of focusing on the movie, it focuses on Roger Rabbit's cartoons. Outside of the one at the beginning of the film, there were 3 cartoons to coincide with the movie, which I highly recommend watching, by the way. But this is trying to connect to that side of Roger. The concept is here, it's well animated, it's funny at points, and interacting with various items is intriguing. The problem is, the game is very short and it has no music. Now that might not seem like a problem, but watch any Mickey Mouse, Donald, Goofy, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry cartoon without music, and something feels off. Music for cartoons is a very unique vibe that only a very talented composer is able to get right. You need to find that sweet spot of capturing the tone and radically changing it on a dime. Get that wrong, the cartoon loses its personality and fails. The same applies to games. If you have a desert level, but it sounds like a factory theme, it doesn't matter how good the level is, something feels wrong. And that's doubly so when you're trying to replicate the feel of a zany cartoon with no music. It just doesn't work. I don't want to be mean to the game, but it's something that genuinely upset me because all but one of the puzzle pieces are there, and it's the one that without it, the rest crumbles. It's such a shame. Now we move on to the final Amiga and DOS game of the video, Dick Tracy's crime-solving adventure. I know, right? Didn't think we'd be seeing him again. This is unfortunately not a good game. It is very slow-paced and very dull, and everyone who's a suspect looks like they're having a stroke. I will say though, I like that it's treating the game like you're in a comic book. That's a nice touch. The Lucky Dime Caper starring Donald Duck for the Game Gear is awesome. It's a solid platformer with fun music and I highly recommend it. It's just a good time. As is the game for the Master System. This is another instance where, yes, there are definitely similarities, but the level design is very different in many places, and having it as the same entry just isn't right. It has its own identity through its level design, and I respect that. Stop being so good, it's harder to make jokes when I want to compliment you. Oh yeah, it's more of the Disney afternoon gang! Tailspin always seemed weird to me, not because it was bad, oh no, I love it, but more in the sense that Disney decided to bring back characters from the Jungle Book, but hey, it gave us a lot of entertainment, so I'm not complaining. Tailspin got a game for the NES and Game Boy, and I am delighted to say it is bloody brilliant. Create a game based around the subject matter with a genre that connects, and 100% a scrolling shooter is the best way to go. Combine that with awesome design, well-crafted secrets, upgrades for Baloo, yes! Oh, this is perfection in a Disney game, what a treat. And then comes Tailspin for TurboGrafx-16. This is like night and day, like chalk and cheese, like a great game and a game that makes me want to tear out my hair. The level design is fairly bland, but it has the added bonus of being excruciatingly difficult. Oh goody, you're really spoiling me. This is such a sour note to end on. We can't finish the video with number 100 being a disappointment. So, how about one more? Here we are, the final game of 1991 is the 101st game. It is such a pity it's not a 101 Dalmatians game. I didn't want to end with a bad game, and I also wanted to conclude 1991. With this, that's a full decade of Disney games, which I think is pretty cool. Quackshot, starring Donald Duck for Sega Genesis and Sega Saturn, releasing on December 19th, 1991. I love this game. Do you want an excellent platformer with fantastic music, fun level design, and a power that makes Donald go wah? Then boy do I have the game for you. Donald has heard of a wonderful treasure that he wants to give to his girlfriend, Daisy. So to get it, he'll have to go through the streets where Pete appears to have cloned himself, and also, all of the Petes have guns. Where are the police? I know they exist in Duckburg. Scrooge got arrested in DuckTales. From ancient tombs to massive Viking ships, Donald will attack enemies with a plunger gun. I just find it amusing that some of these people and creatures will have been guarding ancient treasure, and then a duck comes along, cartoon splats them with a plunger, and then their work was for nothing. This game sort of kind of not really has Metroidvania aspects, as you can upgrade the plunger and utilize it for platforming and stuff. It's really cool. The game concludes with his dysfunctional relationship nearly ending because an ancient statue not seen for millennia isn't good enough for Daisy. until it breaks, uncovers an ancient necklace, and she's happy about the whole thing. Their relationship must be fascinating if you're a psychologist. And so there you have it, the first 101 Disney games. I'm so proud to have created this video as a proper preservation of the first 101 games, covering the first decade of Disney's gaming history. I don't think a list this extensive has been done before, so that's pretty cool. I couldn't do it alone though. Huge thanks to my friend Multicolored Wiggle for compiling the majority of this list a while back, and then I contributed here and there. The amount of work they did to assemble it is awesome, so seriously, thank you so much. So, since we're celebrating Disney, I'd love to know in the comments, what's your favourite Disney film, or series, or cartoon? What's your favourite Disney game from this video, or maybe favourite Disney game of all time? I'd love to know. But in terms of games, I have barely scratched the surface. Do you want me to continue this? I can make it a series. I will gladly showcase what comes next if you want. As I said, this ended up finishing at 1991. I did kind of want to make it stretch to the end of 1991, so we could continue this in 1992, but hey, I'll leave this down to you. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this, I'd very much appreciate it if you would leave a like, subscribe, maybe share the video around. I also have a Twitch, a Twitter, and a Patreon if you'd like to support myself and the channel. A huge thank you to my Master Tier or higher supporters on Patreon: Daniel Pace, William Michael Hall, Sarah Essex, Jayette, Mr. Perfect, TARDIS Type 40, Luminant Gamer, Seb Fora, Darkfang, Melvin Windhagen, and Leon. Thank you so much for all your support, it really means a lot. If you want to see more stuff like this, I recommend the Teal's Tales playlist, where I played every single Looney Tunes game, every Barbie game, a bunch of party games, more stuff like that. Or, if you want funny playthrough highlights, I recommend the Best of Teal playlist. I also have that content on a separate channel if you want to subscribe there, links and stuff in the description. I want to just tag one more thing at the end here. So many of these games have either been forgotten or completely lost to time. And this is Disney, not some random company no one has heard of. Just how many incredible relics are there that were ahead of its time but no one knows about anymore? I don't know, something to think about. Thank you very much for watching, it means a lot, and I'll see you next time. Take care, bye bye.